The Turkish military and Free Syrian Army enter Afrin town centre after a 2-month battle against the YPG terror group.
As of 8:30 this morning, the FSA, with support of the Turkish army, has complete control of Afrin centre.
Hello and welcome to TRT World from Istanbul. I'm Jamie Owen. You're watching our special coverage of Turkey's Operation Olive Branch. The Turkish army and the Free Syrian Army in Syria have taken control of the town centre in Afrin as part of a Turkish-led border security mission. Free Syrian Army fighters entered the town on Monday morning. It's part of Operation Olive Branch, which Turkey launched in January to secure its border of what Turkey describes as terrorists. The Turkish military and its Syrian allies had already driven the YPG out of much of the countryside, and they've created a safe zone along the border as far as the Euphrates River. Well, Turkey's president congratulated Free Syrian Army forces and those who've worked with the Turkish army to capture the centre of Afrin.
Afrin şehir merkezi Türk Silahlı Kuvvetlerimizin desteğindeki.
As of 8:30 this morning, the FSA, with support from the Turkish army, has complete control of Afrin centre. Most terrorists have fled, and our special troops and the FSA are clearing the remains and traps left behind. There are no more terrorists in Afrin, but rather a rising sentiment of peace and trust. Turkish and FSA flags are now flying high. Once again, we have shown that we stand on the side of the oppressed. Previously in Gerapolis, Elbab and Azaz, whatever we did there, now we are going to do the same in Afrin and the settlements and in its vicinity. 140,000 people returned to their homes in Gerapolis, and now our brothers and sisters from Afrin will return to their homeland as we erase the marks of the terrorists. We will take all the necessary steps to make the area livable. And the citizens in the area who are currently residing in our country and in other places, we will take all the necessary steps to make sure they return to their homelands. We are celebrating this common victory of Turkey and its citizens, and Syria and its citizens. This was the best response given to those who were trying to poison the relationship between the two. That relationship has existed for many years. We praise our Lord for this day.
Well, let me take you to the Afrin region. Our correspondent, Asad Berg, is there, and Caitlin McGee is in Kilis on the Turkey-Syria border. Asad, let me start with you first of all and tell us the latest position in Afrin.
Well, around Afrin, the Free Syrian Army members have taken up key positions and located themselves in key buildings. We were there earlier. The Free Syrian Army now have complete control of Afrin town. It was a hard-fought battle, but there's still much to do. As we entered later on today, after the morning's after the morning period, we saw a Free Syrian Army soldier being taken away in an ambulance because he had been injured by a landmine. But this is what we found when we entered in the morning with the Free Syrian Army. The Turkish military and the Free Syrian Army have entered Afrin town centre. This signifies a huge defeat for the YPG. Before Afrin town centre was taken, the military said 70% of Afrin was now YPG free. Now they've been pushed out. They've been pushed out of Afrin town centre in a massive victory. 58 days. After 58 days after Operation Olive Branch began, the YPG are now out of Afrin town.
Asad, so that's the military position and it's very clear, but what have you been hearing from ordinary people who live there?
Well, we spoke to many civilians that were leaving Afrin and outside of Afrin and also inside Afrin. There was some fear because the YPG have been in control for so long, and other people were welcoming the forces, the Free Syrian Army and the Turkish military. In fact, there was a lot of praise for especially the Turkish military. However, there were some elements of the Free Syrian Army that entered later that were just taking stuff. I would describe it as looting, but the majority of the Free Syrian Army were welcomed. People seem to be happy that the YPG is no longer there, and as we have seen in other areas of Afrin, people want to come back, but when they feel it's safe to do so.
Let me come to Caitlin now. Kilis has been affected by the spillover from the Syrian war. What difference, if any, will securing Afrin make?
Well, we're 5 kilometres from the border, and Kilis has really felt the impact of fighting from northern Syria in the past, both in terms of social change and security. One of the main objectives of Operation Olive Branch was to link Afrin to another piece of land that Turkey captured last year and create a kind of border security zone of sorts. Now, that would be beneficial for Kilis because even though it's stable now, back in 2016, when Daesh controlled towns over the border, they were firing rockets in here repeatedly. It was so intense at one point, it was daily. 21 people were killed in those attacks. So Kilis has really paid a price for its proximity to the border. In the past, Turkey has said it wanted to set up a sort of safety buffer zone near here. That has not materialised yet, but now it potentially could.
And what is the reaction of Syrians living in Kilis to this military operation?
Well, earlier this week I spoke to the mayor of Kilis and he said 7 years ago the population here was about 98,000. Since then, 130,000 Syrians have crossed over and set up their lives here. Now, that's a pretty fundamental demographic change. That's effectively turned this town into a city with more refugees than locals. We spoke to some of the Syrians living here, just a few, and they all told us that they welcomed the news that Turkey had taken control of Afrin and hoped that it would lead to some sort of peace and security in Syria in the future.
Caitlin McGee in Kilis and Asad Berg in Afrin, thank you both very much. Well, the YPG has become one of the main players in this 8-year war in Syria. Backed by the United States, the group has captured large areas of territory, including the oil-rich regions of northern Syria. Joseph Hyatt is here now with a bit of context. Joseph.
Thank you, Jamie. Well, the YPG was formed in 2011 by leaders of the PKK, which Turkey designated a terrorist organisation for its 3-decade armed campaign against the Turkish state that has claimed more than 40,000 civilians and security personnel. The YPG took control of towns including Afrin and Kobani from the Assad regime in 2012. It also defended Kobani against Daesh, which gained it international recognition as a fighting force. On the instruction of US generals in the field, the YPG was renamed the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, in 2015 in an effort to give it more international credibility. With the support of the US, the YPG expanded its control over the region and along the border with Turkey. It managed to capture the key city of Manbij, as well as the provinces of Hasaka and Raqqa that are rich in oil. Now, in November 2017, US President Donald Trump said that the Pentagon would stop arming the group, but Turkey says it still has not happened. Jamie.
Joseph, thank you very much. Well, let's talk now to Andrew Hopkins, who's been following developments. We'll talk to him a little bit later. First, the fall of Afrin is a major milestone for Turkey as it pursues Operation Olive Branch. But as Turkey political correspondent Andrew Hopkins first explains, it doesn't mean the operation is over.
It was on the 20th of January that the Turkish military went into Afrin for an operation that had been expected for several months.
We will destroy the terror corridor gradually, starting from the west. The Afrin operation has in effect started in the field.
Turkey has several objectives: to clear the YPG from the Afrin region and to stop it creating what the Turkish president called a corridor of terror to the Mediterranean. to link Afrin to land taken during Euphrates Shield by the Free Syrian Army and Turkey last year, to strengthen the opposition, and possibly move on to other areas controlled by the YPG, including Manbij. Whether that happens remains to be seen. Former US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was in Ankara last month to see whether he would get America's YPG allies to withdraw from Manbij. He's now been sacked, but Turkey is still hopeful.
Türkiye-Amerika ilişkileri kişilere bağlı bir şey değildir.
Turkey-US relations do not depend on individuals. It's not a secret we have experienced some problems with the USA, which we've been regarding as an ally and strategic partner recently. The PKK and other PKK-affiliated groups like the PYD and YPG, under the protection of the USA, have been hurting innocent people, and this hurts us.
But it's not just about the battlefield. Turkey also says it wants to keep civilian casualties to a minimum and make the area safe so people can return to their homes. And it's not yet clear how that will turn out.
Well, let's go to Andrew Hopkins now, who's been following developments in Ankara. Now that Afrin town centre has been taken, is Operation Olive Branch complete?
No, Jamie, it's not. We've heard from the Turkish President and the Deputy Prime Minister today, Bekir Bozdağ, basically saying there's still work to do. There are still some outlying areas that have to be cleared of the YPG, and there are still plenty of checks to be made for any bombs or potential booby traps that have been left behind. Now, if we go back to Operation Euphrates Shield, which was in 2016-2017, you've probably got there something like a template which the Turkish government is hoping to sort of now carry through in Afrin. Back then, in 2016, that was the first time the Turkish military went into northern Syria with the Free Syrian Army around an area around Jarablus, very close to Afrin. And after all the fighting was finished, all the YPG positions had been cleared and a few Daesh supply routes had been cut off. They actually got to work to restore some of the infrastructure, build some schools and some hospitals, and the Turkish government says about 140,000 people have been able to return to their homes because of that operation. And I think the Turkish government is, because there's maybe the eyes of the world looking on them in this operation, they want to show it's being carried out in an appropriate manner with as few civilian casualties as possible as they try to rid the area of what they see as a terrorist organisation.
And what are Turkey's plans now? What next? And how could it affect relations with the other major foreign players in Syria?
Well, the United States was never really that keen on this Afrin operation, and as it sort of moves into its later stages, attention's probably going to move towards another city called Manbij, which is not actually part of Afrin, but is in northern Syria. It's also controlled by the YPG, and there's also a presence of United States troops there. Now, Turkey for some time has been trying to get the YPG to pull out of that city too, and has been threatening to go into there as well. Now, the US Secretary of State, the former one, Rex Tillerson, he was in Ankara last month to try and come up with a solution with Turkish officials to this situation. But now he's been sacked. That situation has been left a bit dangling. Nobody's really sure how the new Secretary of State's going to view this particular problem. So that's we'll have to wait and see as regards relations with the United States now with Russia. They really gave their tacit consent to this operation. They had a few military observers in Afrin before, which they withdrew. And Iran, they have been critical of the operation, but they haven't really been the loudest critic in the room. And the fact that the three presidents of Turkey, Russia and Iran are all going to be having a meeting here in Ankara in a couple of weeks' time probably shows you that it's not really affecting relations with those at all.
Andrew Hopkins in Ankara, thank you very much. Well, Operation Olive Branch was launched almost 2 months ago. Let's take a look at some of the figures. Since then, it's claimed more than 3,500 YPG terrorists who've been killed, injured or captured. And to give you some perspective on that, the Turkish army says it now has control of more than 90% of the Afrin region. So far, 46 Turkish soldiers and 159 FSA fighters have lost their lives since the operation began. Turkey says it has protected civilians. Well, let's talk to Professor Ahmed Oysal now, who's the director of the Centre for Middle East Studies in Ankara. First of all, what next for Operation Olive Branch in your judgment, now that Afrin centre has been taken from the YPG?
Yes, good night for everybody, good evening. I think the next step is to clean all the mines and booby traps, etc. Plus to secure the region, the villages and the towns, and which is continuing. And after that, to establish a more civilian government in the region. This is the purpose, and to make sure that PKK does not enter or return to destabilize the region, and to leave or to prepare the rule of law in the region. And with the Syrians and maybe Syrian Kurds also, Turkey prepares to make a more livable region for everybody, because we have so many Kurds inside Turkey right now as refugees or visitors that fled from PKK persecution. Now they will go back and they will take care, or they will be part of the solution right now. So it's going to be a rebuilding process, rebuilding the almost all institutions inside Afrin.
So is this the end of the road for the YPG in the region of Afrin? I mean, is there any possibility of them regrouping and launching some sort of counterattack?
I don't think so. Maybe they can attack a couple of maybe security facilities, etc., and create some terroristic activities. But other than that, I don't think they will have any ground to come back, because they are tested and they were tested and they failed. And especially these ditches around the city, the PKK trusting the Kurdish population or counting or betting on the Kurdish population would follow them. And this did not happen in Diyarbakir and in other cities that PKK tried. And they also failed one more time in Afrin, that Kurdish people did not go war or go fight with them or protect them. When the civilians in Afrin left the PKK, they had to flee also. So there is no, I mean, I don't think there is a strong base. There is some following for PKK, PYD inside Afrin, but I think with this corrupt rule that they establish in the region, I think nobody will miss them, especially the Afrinians and the Kurds in the region will not miss them. So they will they will not find any ground to regroup or to reform themselves or reorganize themselves to come back. But there are, of course, this is almost like an industry right now, a terror industry for PKK. They can buy some people or they can find some maybe committed followers, but few of them, especially when the foreign fighters, stop supporting them, that we see in Afrin also. So they will have less support, especially less chance. Also, Turkish security forces will take necessary measures not to allow them. So I don't think this is a big problem right now.
Professor, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
So how is all of this being received in Washington? Adiz Tianshan is in D.C. for us tonight. Any U.S. reaction so far to today's events?
Well, the United States has been very ambivalent. It's no secret to any of the U.S. officials that the groups Turkey's fighting in northern Syria have direct organic links to the PKK, a group that the U.S. itself considers a terror group. But in a strategic move, they've chosen to use them against Daesh. And so there's a major conflict of interest here, and that's why we are getting mixed messages. On one hand, White House was suggesting earlier this year that the U.S. was easing off its support for the Syrian Kurds, but on the other hand, almost simultaneously, we're hearing from the Pentagon a contradiction, saying that it would continue to stand by the Kurds. Now, these conflicting messages appear to be an effort by the U.S. administration to balance competing pressure. So while the Kurds are considered critical partners on the ground, the United States is also trying to appease a NATO ally, which has been furious over the U.S. military support for its archenemy.
And given that Manbij is the next objective in Turkey's operation, what tensions could that potentially cause between these two allies?
Well, the stakes are going to be much higher now because Turkish forces are threatening to attack Manbij as well, to clear that area from YPG forces as well. But that's where United States has deployed military personnel in their fight against Daesh. Now, a spokesperson has commented to that scenario, saying that the coalition forces are there in that area and they have a right to defend themselves and will do so if necessary. And we've also heard from White House after Turkey signaling of potential attacks against Manbij. They've said that they urge Turkey to de-escalate and limit its military actions. But Turkey remains committed. We're hearing that they want to clear that entire area. So there is a real risk that Turkish and American forces could find themselves on different sides of the same front line, which is a scenario that obviously nobody wants. But how to avoid it exactly has still not been addressed. Now, we had a meeting expected between the former Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, and his Turkish counterpart, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, who was expected to arrive in Washington this week. But that meeting has obviously got cancelled because of his Tillerson's unexpected departure. Now, that another high-level meeting will still be taking place among high-level officials this week on Wednesday, on the 21st of March. But obviously, the fact that Pompeo will be replacing Tillerson only by the end of the month, that some of the key positions has still not been filled in the Trump administration, are obviously slowing down these diplomatic contacts.
Adiz, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get more now on the operation's impacts on the Turkey-US relations. Let's talk to TRT World Defense analyst Ubey Shibanda. I just want to pick up with you, first of all, on the sense of the changing nature of the US administration. We've seen a number of changing faces in the US, and I wonder how difficult that makes Turkey's position in negotiating and talking to one voice in the White House and the administration.
That certainly has complicated things. There was meant to be another round of negotiations between the U.S. and Turkey on the issue of Syria and the future of Manbij, and how the U.S. could work with Turkey to provide joint security supervision of that strategic city in northern Aleppo province. Of course, the city of Manbij was once held by Daesh. Now the YPG occupies it. There's a notable U.S. presence in that city. Capturing that city is important because it is the gateway into eastern Raqqa province and the middle Euphrates River Valley. So it is a prized strategic city that is meant to hold the gains made against Daesh, to stop Daesh from re-emerging. Now, the problem is that who can Turkey negotiate with? Now we have a new Secretary of State. Pompeo is coming from the CIA. It's notable also that the CIA also has a relationship with the YPG on the counterterrorism front, on fighting against Daesh. But now we have a whole new strategic reality on the ground in Syria, as the YPG has officially declared it will no longer fight Daesh, will rather use its resources to fight the Turkish army and the Free Syrian Army. So now the question is, what will the U.S. do now that with Afrin operation almost concluded? Will the U.S. work with Turkey and possibly the Free Syrian Army to provide a joint security force for Manbij and possibly other Arab majority towns in the middle Euphrates River Valley and push the YPG out of these towns to the other side of the Euphrates River? It's a complicated question, and time will tell what the U.S. will do.
Turkey's military will no doubt be relieved about today's news of taking Afrin center, but it would be naive, would it not, to think the terror risk and terror presence in Syria is suddenly over. It isn't, is it?
Indeed. I mean, the capture of Afrin may be just the beginning. The YPG, now, the myth of the YPG and the myth of its invincibility has certainly taken a very heavy blow, given that the operation after 58 days was able to capture the majority of the province of Afrin and the city of Afrin. Of course, this is after a significant amount of bluster and bravado by the YPG PKK terror group, claiming that they would turn Afrin into a Vietnam for Turkey and the Free Syrian Army. That has not happened. But what will happen next? the YPG is still in control of a significant amount of territory in northern Syria and eastern Syria that it could still use to launch cross-border attacks into Turkey proper and possibly into Afrin. So that's another major question here on what the YPG will do next. They are still heavily armed. They still have a significant amount of weapons that were provided to them by the U.S. on one side, and possibly some weapons that they've captured from the Assad regime. So we have to still be very cautious on what happens next. You still have a very determined enemy that has taken a very heavy blow, but we do know that the tactics of the YPG has been to hit and run, to launch guerrilla-style attacks. So that may be the next phase in this operation. And of course, there's still pockets of Daesh in eastern Syria that may now be able to expand as the YPG focuses its resources in fighting Turkey and the Free Syrian Army, and that's a potential danger, and that's why you really need the U.S. to sit in the negotiating table with Turkey to prevent Daesh from re-emerging in the areas that the YPG is no longer operating in.
Ube Shabanda, TRT World Defence Analyst, thank you very much indeed. And don't forget, you can get more details on all of this story on our website. We'll have more international reaction to today's news throughout the course of the coming hours. From all of us here, goodbye.